1350. I'm sure you've heard that statistic thrown around by people trying to justify why black people are targeted by the police more in this country, or racial minorities in general, but it usually applies to black people. Um, I've heard this argument so many times on the internet, and I personally used to use this argument myself as kind of a gotcha. I kind of slipped down the alt-right pipeline a little bit back in 2016, and I was even discussing overrepresentation of people of color in our criminal justice system with a woman of color that I worked with in an office setting. And she was trying to describe to me and explain to me what white privilege is, and I just wasn't getting it. And we got on the topic of disparity in law enforcement, and she tried to explain to me the reasons why, and I just kind of threw that out there as a I kind of like to call it my pigeon argument, or well, not mine, but a pigeon argument. Everybody's heard the old saying, if you play chess with a pigeon, it doesn't matter if you how hard you play, how well you play, it's just gonna knock all the pieces over, shit on the board, and then act like it won. And that's what I did. I used the 1350 statistic of, well, black people make up 13% of the population, but they account for 50% of incarcerations in this country, without really understanding why that was happening. And that there are a lot of elements that go into this. Some of the things that go into this are over policing in black neighborhoods. Black neighborhoods are statistically over policed. They are policed more than white neighborhoods in our country. So of course they're going to have higher rates of crime. Another thing is, plays into white privilege. White perpetrators are undercharged and underconvicted. And when they are convicted, they're given significantly lower prison sentences for the exact same crime with the exact same amount of priors as a person of color in this country. And I wanted to go over a couple of things with you because I recently had a discussion with somebody on Facebook, and they threw that statistic at me. They were also citing the Daily Wire, which is, of course, run by Ben Shapiro, a known white nationalist. And I linked to him the Ultimate Research document, which was compiled by an amazing streamer and YouTuber by the name of Vosh. He's much larger than me, so it doesn't need me to shout him out, but go check him out. He's based as fuck. All of his opinions are based on fact, and he is really good at explaining his points of view and why he holds them and why they're valid. But we're going to go ahead and take a look at a couple of things. The first thing we're going to look at here is a research document that covers policing in Washington, D.C. So up here, we have an introduction. It shows that black people make up 46.5% of DC's population. And we can see that statistic here on the on this nice little graph that we have here, or a bar graph. And white people only make up 37. Yet, we see here that stops overall, black people are stopped 72% of the time, whereas whites, which make up about 10% less of the population, are only stopped 14% of the time. And the disparity gets even higher when you go to stops that lead to no warning. You know, a common joke is, well, I got caught driving while black. The thing is, that's an actual thing in our country. A lot of people that don't want to admit that people with my skin color do experience a modicum of privilege in our society. Don't like hearing that, and they think it's just a witty joke, but it honestly is a real thing. I mean, just looking at this one graph here, you can see that stops that led to no warning, ticket, or arrest, 86.1% of them were people of color, black people in the DC area, whereas only 5.5% of them were white. And then searches of vehicles, searches with no warning, ticket, or arrest, 91.1%, whereas only 2.4% of the white population were searched during these stops. And that kind of plays into what we're talking about here is that black people are pulled over in this country at much higher rates, and this is just traffic stops, at much higher rates than white people in this country. And we're going to go over another figure here in a different study covering Ferguson, Missouri, that elucidates that further. Um, but a lot of people that I talk to that don't want to accept the fact that because of my skin tone, I do have a certain privilege in this country. And white privilege is just one of many privileges that people in this country have. But it's a very real thing, and it's very hard. It was very hard for me to accept that. It was only the last couple of months, honestly, before I fully accepted the fact that I do have a privilege in this country because of the way I was born, because I'm white. And the reason why I didn't want to accept that is because it made me feel as though I should feel bad about it and that I did something wrong and that I should feel guilty about it. They aren't asking us to feel guilty. They're asking us to acknowledge it, address the problem, and work to fix it. At least in my experience, the people that I've talked to, and even people that I was being ignorant as hell with and throwing 1350 at. And she said that I was racist for saying it. And at the time, I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not racist. I'm just stating facts. Yes, black people are convicted of 50% of the crime in this country, particularly violent crime in this country. But that doesn't take into account any of the factors that lead into why. Looking at this figure here, we're going to look at two from this study. In Ferguson, Missouri, 1 in 8 people that were stopped by the police were white. And blacks were 3.5 times more likely to be stopped than white people. And looking at these bars here, 63% of the white people that were stopped were moving violations. Equipment and licensing, the disparity goes up to 58 for black people. Moving down to this, and this is one of the things that a lot of people harp on is drug crime. Only people of color, black people, are getting arrested and pulled over for drugs. The thing is, if you look at this chart here, you'll see that white and black people are stopped at different rates. Black people are stopped at a much higher rate than white people are and searched looking for contraband. Black people are stopped more. Yet, as you can see, more white people have illicit substances in their possession when they're stopped, despite being pulled over less. So black people are using drugs more than white people. There are studies that show like marijuana usage, which in many states, thankfully, is getting legalized, but marijuana usage, white people and black people use marijuana at about the same rate, but blacks are disproportionately arrested for it and searched for it. And right here in Ferguson, with this one chart that we see right here, despite the fact that white people are pulled over less often and searched less often than black people, even searched on the street, more white people that are searched have contraband than black people do. And that's one thing that it took me a long time to realize because nobody had explained it to me, and that's kind of my fault. It's not their job to explain it to me. So maybe a white kid sitting here at his laptop with a microphone explaining it to you, maybe it might help it sink in. I don't know. But black people are targeted by police in this country because of this narrative that has been passed down for 400 years in this country that black people are less intelligent, that black people are less than. They're inherently criminal. And if you ask a white nationalist or Nazis, they'll say it's genetic and that it's just part of their culture, and white people don't have that problem. No, it's because they're over-policed. I have been pulled over in my life 4 times. Twice did it lead to a ticket. I've only been pulled over 4 times, and I'm in my late 20s. A lot of people of color have a much higher number than I do. And there are other studies that show that there is racial profiling when it comes to traffic stops. But strangely enough, the disparity of black people being pulled over as compared to white people evaporates as soon as the sun goes down. As soon as officers can't see who is driving the car, the numbers are about even, because they're pulling people over for actual traffic violations rather than profiling them. And there are a lot of reasons why crime is more present in black communities than in white communities, and a lot of people that want to dismiss the racial aspect of it, and I did the same thing. A lot of people that want to dismiss the racial aspect say, "Oh, it's not a race thing; it's a class thing," which is partially true. It's ignorant, but it is partially true. It is a class thing. The problem is, because of generations of racism and disenfranchisement in this country against black people and all people of color in this country, but particularly against the black community, 200 plus years of slavery, and then another 100 years of Jim Crow before the Civil Rights Act. And then after that, you had broken windows policing, stop and frisk, redlining. All of these things compound on top of one another to create a financial disparity between white people and black people in this country. And it's not a racial thing. It's not, there aren't racial reasons why crime is more present in black communities. It's financial reasons. Poverty breeds crime, not race. If you have been financially disenfranchised for generations and you find yourself in abject poverty in this country, which we have a massive problem with, and it's heavily present in the black community and other communities of people of color, but particularly in the black community, if you don't have the same opportunities that I did growing up or that other white people do, they're not given the same opportunities as us, and there's very few options for them to make a living in this country, to get by in a very lucrative way, which we see by drug conviction statistics in this country is through the sale of drugs and other petty crimes such as larceny, shoplifting, things of that nature, robbery, and you get into more violent crimes as you go on, because communities come together around these types of activities, creating organized crime organizations, which also plays into the black on black crime argument, which I'll cover in a different video. But they come together to support one another because they don't have the same kind of support from our society and from our system that white people do from birth. They have to find other opportunities, and that ultimately ends up, in many cases, leading them towards a life of crime, which is why we see such high incarceration rates. I mean, looking at this chart right here, you can see the number of this green line right down here from 1976 to 2014, which is the latest this data is available. This is rate per 100,000 people in this country. White people are way down here. Looking at the black community up here in the 90s, this is the time frame when stop and frisk and other broken windows policing I lost my train of thought. Broken windows policing was instituted, is what accounts for this large spike right here in the middle of this graph. And yes, it has been coming down, but that's because crime since the 90s has decreased. Violent crime in this country has decreased by almost half since the 90s, nationwide. It's not any one particular race that suddenly became less violent. It's as a nation we have, yet we don't see a massive drop in black incarceration because of these previous policies that were implemented. If you have a criminal record, you're more likely to be judged more harshly by a judge. I mean, not more likely, it's definitively proven, the data backs it up, that you're more likely to be judged harsher by in a court of law if you have priors than if you don't. And if you were young, which most crime is committed by young people in this country, if you were young during these years, like I was, and you lived in these communities that had broken windows policing and stop and frisk, You have a high likelihood of having priors. And because of financial disenfranchisement in this country for generations, that's really the only option that's available to most black people. Yes, we've had affirmative action, but that hasn't really fixed the problem. So when people say 1350 as a gotcha, a lot of the times they aren't meaning it from a place of racism or ignorance, or it is coming from a place of ignorance, but it's not outright racism, at least not for myself when I use this argument. It comes from a place of ignorance. The statistic itself is accurate, but there are so many factors that lead to this conclusion for the black community, that people don't want to address, that people don't want to acknowledge in this country because it's inconvenient. It invalidates a lot of people's preconceived notions about the black community and why they feel the way they do. And of course, you do have the racists in this country that spout 1350 and believe that it's, genetic, that it has something to do with, just their culture. They're just naturally more criminal, things of that nature. And, those chuds will always be there. But the point of this video is try to change the perspective in people's minds when they hear the statistic of, 13% of the population commits 50% of the violent crime and crime in general in this country. There are reasons to explain that aren't just black people are criminals. So I hope this video has helped. I've been trying to explain it as best as I can. I don't really edit my videos at all. I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here. I don't script them. I just kind of present what I find, and Vosh with his research document provided the links that I used here in this video. If you want to chat about this, I stream pretty regularly on Twitch every Sunday night from 9 p.m. till about 2 or 3 in the morning. I stream with my wife. You can come hang out there, ask me questions. I'd be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. My socials are up at the top. Feel free to give me a follow on Twitch, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Twitter. I even have an Instagram, which is it's more personal things about myself, my family, my wife, and things that we do. But yeah, feel free to give me a follow on there. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on. I even have a Discord that you can Discord that you can check out, and we can chat in there if you want to come on stream with me at twitch.tv/MickRed2, and we can chat there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. But thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I know my last video was kind of a long one, but I just want to get my feelings, my opinions about that out there. Hopefully I'll get better at this the more practice I have. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.